The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched across nearly a kilometer of carefully shaped metal and stone. Light fell from panels set into the ceiling far above, casting everything in a soft blue glow that was meant to feel neutral to as many species as possible. Representatives from 47 spacefaring civilizations sat in tiered rows that curved around a central speaking platform. Some breathed oxygen, others carried their own atmospheric bubbles. A few existed as projected holograms because their physical forms could not survive outside their homeworlds. Today they had gathered to discuss expansion. The word sounded gentle, almost friendly. It hid the truth of what the Council did when it expanded. High Arbiter Kosovan of the Dominion faction stood at the central platform. He was tall for his species, with gray skin that shifted to purple at the edges, and 4 arms that he used constantly when he spoke. His voice carried the weight of someone who had never been told no. "The Orion Spur remains outside our governance," he said. "For too long we have allowed this region to exist without the benefits of Council membership. The time has come to extend our reach and bring order to these unaligned systems." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Extension of governance meant new resources, new labor, new worlds to strip bare and add to the great machine of Council's civilization. But one voice rose above the murmurs. "I must speak against this motion." The chamber fell quiet. Ambassador Threlvac of the Mordesi Collective walked slowly toward the speaking platform. He was old for his kind. His blue scales faded to a pale gray in many places. He walked with the careful steps of someone who had seen too much and remembered all of it. Kosovan's expression shifted to something between annoyance and amusement. "The distinguished ambassador from the Mordesi wishes to share his concerns. We will, of course, hear them." The way he said it made clear that hearing and listening were very different things. Threlvac reached the platform and turned to face the assembled representatives. His eyes moved across the crowd, meeting the gazes of those he had worked with for decades. Many looked away. 50 years ago, he began, the Mordesi Collective encountered a species in the Orion Spur. We thought them primitive. Their ships were small. Their weapons seemed basic. We decided to test them, as we had tested so many others. He paused. The chamber was completely silent now. The engagement lasted 11 minutes. In those 11 minutes, we lost 340 warships. The humans lost none. The silence broke into noise. Representatives shouted questions and demands. Some laughed in disbelief. Kosovan raised his forearms for quiet. "Ambassador, surely you exaggerate. No species could achieve such a ratio against Mordesi vessels. Your fleet was among the finest in Council space." "I do not exaggerate." Threlvac's voice was flat. "I was there. I commanded the flagship that day. I watched our ships die like insects flying into flame. And then, High Arbiter, the humans did something that terrified me far more than their weapons." "And what was that?" "They stopped." More murmurs, but confused now. Threlvac continued before anyone could interrupt. "They could have destroyed our entire fleet. Every ship we had brought to that engagement was at their mercy. Instead, the moment we ceased firing, they ceased firing. A human voice came through our communications asking if we needed medical assistance. They offered to help us rescue survivors from our damaged vessels." He let that sink in for a moment. "We had come to conquer them. They responded by offering mercy. And in that moment, I understood something that I have never forgotten. The humans were not primitive. They were not weak. They were simply choosing not to show us what they truly were." Kosovan waved one of his arms dismissively. "A touching story, Ambassador. But what you describe sounds like a species with limited resources. They won a single battle through surprise, and then lacked the strength to press their advantage. This is hardly reason to fear them." "You do not understand." Threlvac's voice grew sharp. "The humans did not lack the strength. They chose restraint. There is a vast difference. In the 50 years since that encounter, the Mordesi have watched them carefully. They have colonized 47 worlds. They have built nothing that looks like a military fleet, and yet every probe we have sent into their space has simply vanished. Every long-range scan returns data that makes no sense. They are hiding something, High Arbiter, something they do not wish us to see." Kosovan laughed. It was a cold sound without any real humor in it. 47 worlds, the Council commands thousands. Even if these humans possess some clever tricks, mathematics does not lie. We could absorb them with a fraction of our combined strength. Mathematics told us the same thing 50 years ago. We were wrong. A representative from the Veth Syndicate spoke up from the middle tiers. What do you suggest, Ambassador? That we simply leave this region alone forever? Allow a potentially dangerous species to grow unchecked on our border? Threlvac turned to face the new speaker. I suggest exactly that. Leave them alone. The humans have shown no interest in expansion beyond their current territory. They have made no aggressive moves against any council species. They trade peacefully with the few independent worlds near their borders. If we do not provoke them, they will not provoke us. And if you are wrong, Cosvin asked, if they continue to grow while we sit idle, if in a century they decide to expand, and we face a threat 100 times worse than today, then we will face that threat together with more knowledge than we have now. But if we provoke them today, High Arbiter, we may discover that we have awakened something we cannot put back to sleep. The chamber buzzed with debate. Representatives argued among themselves. The Mordesi warning had clearly affected some of them, but others saw only opportunity. The Orion Spur was rich in resources. The humans were few in number. The math seemed simple. Cosvin called for the vote. It was not close. By a margin of 31 to 16, the Council approved the resolution to extend governance to the Orion Spur. A diplomatic vessel would be sent to deliver humanity's invitation to join the Council. If they refused, a fleet would follow to help them reconsider. Threlvac stood motionless as the vote was announced. He watched the celebration among the Dominion faction representatives, their certainty that they had just secured new wealth and power for their species. He saw the nervous looks from those who had voted against, species who had their own reasons to fear what the Council called integration. When the session ended, he walked slowly from the chamber. His aide, a young Mordesi named Iral Shah, fell into step beside him. Ambassador, what do we do now? Threlvac did not answer immediately. They walked through corridors filled with representatives from dozens of species, all discussing the vote and what it meant for their various interests. None of them understood what they had just done. Begin quiet evacuation of Mordesi civilians from the border systems, Threlvac finally said. Any system within 50 light-years of human space. Do it slowly. Do not attract attention. Iral Shah's scales shifted to a darker shade, a sign of fear among their kind. You believe it will be that bad? I believe that we have just made the worst mistake in Council history. The humans gave us mercy 50 years ago when they could have destroyed us. We have now voted to repay that mercy with threats and demands. He stopped walking and turned to face his aide. What I saw in that 11-minute battle has never left my dreams, Iral Shah. The calm efficiency of their weapons, the complete lack of fear in their movements, and most of all, the sadness in the voice that offered us medical assistance after we had tried to kill them. Sadness? They were not happy about what they had done to us. They did not celebrate their victory. They simply asked if we needed help. Threlvac resumed walking. I have spent 50 years trying to understand what kind of species feels sad about winning a battle they did not start. I still do not have an answer, but I know this. We have just forced them to show us what they truly are, and I fear that the Council will not survive the lesson. 3 days later, a diplomatic vessel departed from Varanthos Prime. It carried formal documents demanding humanity's submission to Council governance. It carried gifts meant to demonstrate the wealth and power of the civilizations making the demand. And it carried the absolute certainty of its crew that they were delivering an offer no reasonable species could refuse. They did not understand that humans had a very different definition of reasonable. On the bridge of the diplomatic vessel, Captain Nesvo reviewed the mission parameters one final time. Everything seemed straightforward. Deliver the message, record the response, return home. Simple. He had no way of knowing that in a quiet room on a human world called Earth, a woman named Director Chen had already received word of his coming. She had read the Council's demands. She had sighed, closed her eyes, and asked the same question she always asked when moments like this arrived. Are we really going to have to do this again? No one answered. The question was not meant for anyone else. The stars continued to burn in the darkness between worlds. The diplomatic vessel continued on its course. And somewhere in the shadows of space that the Council had never bothered to look into, humanity began to wake up. The planet called New Meridian hung in the space like a blue and green jewel. From orbit, it looked peaceful. Clouds drifted across continents covered in forests and grasslands. Cities sparkled along coastlines and rivers, their lights visible even from thousands of kilometers above. 12 million humans called this world home. Fleet Commander Istal studied the planet through the main viewport of his flagship, the Arbiter's Will. Behind him stretched the most powerful armada ever assembled for a single diplomatic mission. 200 warships representing 12 council species hung in formation, their weapons charged and ready, cruisers from the Veth Syndicate, destroyers from the Korath Empire, even 3 of the massive dreadnoughts that the Dominion faction reserved for only the most important operations. This was not diplomacy. This was a demonstration of overwhelming force designed to make resistance unthinkable. "Open a channel to the planet," Yistal commanded. His communications officer worked the controls. A moment later, a human face appeared on the screen. She was middle-aged by human standards, with dark hair streaked with gray and eyes that seemed to look directly through the camera and into Yistal himself. "This is Director Chen of the New Meridian Colonial Authority. You have entered human space without permission. Please state your purpose and prepare to withdraw." Yistal almost laughed. The calm certainty in her voice was remarkable given the firepower aimed at her world. "I am Fleet Commander Yistal of the Galactic Council Combined Fleet. I carry a formal resolution from the Council extending governance over all human territories. You will receive our diplomatic team and accept the terms of integration. Resistance will be met with appropriate force." Director Chen was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried something that sounded almost like pity. "Fleet Commander, I'm going to give you some advice. Turn your ships around. Go back to your council. Tell them that humanity respectfully declines their generous offer. There doesn't need to be any trouble here today. Your advice is noted and rejected. You have 1 solar rotation to accept our terms. After that period, we will begin enforcement operations." Yistal made a gesture to cut the communication, but Chen spoke again before he could. "Commander, I need you to understand something. I'm not threatening you. I'm trying to help you. The people I work for, the people who actually make decisions for humanity, they've seen your fleet. They know why you're here, and they've already decided what happens next if you don't leave." Something in her tone made Yistal pause. There was no fear in it, no anger, just a tired kind of certainty, like someone explaining to a child why they should not touch a hot surface. "What happens next?" he asked despite himself. "That depends entirely on you. Right now you can leave, and everyone goes home safe. You get to see your family again. Your crew gets to grow old. The soldiers on all those ships get to live out their lives. That's option 1. And option 2? Chen sighed. Option 2 is that you stay. You issue your ultimatum. You wait for the deadline to pass, and then you find out why the Mordesi have been so quiet about what happened to them 50 years ago." Istal felt a chill run through his body, but he pushed it aside. He was a fleet commander of the Galactic Council. He commanded 200 warships. This single human woman could not frighten him with vague warnings. "Your time begins now, Director. 1 solar rotation." He cut the communication. The hours that followed were tense but uneventful. Istal's fleet maintained position in orbit. Sensor teams reported normal activity on the planet below. No military mobilization, no evacuation. No signs of any preparation for the conflict that would surely come. This troubled some of his officers. If the humans truly intended to resist, why were they not preparing? Where were their defense forces? Why did their civilian population seem completely unconcerned about the armada hanging over their heads? Istal dismissed these concerns. The humans were clearly hoping that their bluff would work, that the council would lose nerve and withdraw. When the deadline passed and the first strikes began, they would quickly realize their mistake. The solar rotation ended. "No response from the planet?" Istal asked. "Nothing, Commander. All channels are silent." He nodded. "Very well. Signal the fleet. Begin enforcement operations. Target military installations and government facilities only. We want this planet intact." 200 warships began to move. They spread into attack formation, weapon systems powering up. The first wave of strikes would be surgical, precise, designed to demonstrate council power without causing unnecessary destruction. They made it approximately 40,000 kilometers before everything went wrong. Istal was watching the tactical display when it happened. One moment, his fleet was advancing in perfect formation. The next moment, every ship went dark. Lights flickered. Consoles died. The gentle hum of engines that every spacer learned to ignore suddenly fell silent. Emergency lighting came on, casting the bridge in a dim red glow. Officers shouted reports that made no sense. Main power was gone. Backup systems were gone. Even the chemical emergency batteries seemed drained. "What happened?" Istol demanded. "Report." "Unknown, Commander. All systems failed simultaneously. We're checking for damage, but instruments are not responding." The darkness lasted for perhaps 30 seconds. It felt like hours. Then the lights came back on. Istol looked at the tactical display and felt his blood turn to ice. His fleet was surrounded. Human ships filled the space around them in every direction. Not dozens, thousands. They had appeared from nowhere, without any warning from sensors, without any visible approach. They simply existed where moments before there had been nothing but empty space. And they were enormous. The smallest of them dwarfed the Council dreadnoughts. The largest were bigger than anything Istol had ever seen, bigger than anything he had believed possible. They hung in space with the patient stillness of predators who had no need to hurry. "Commander?" His tactical officer's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm reading weapon signatures from the human vessels. I don't understand the readings. The power levels they can't be correct." "What do you mean?" "Sir, any one of those ships could destroy our entire fleet in seconds, and there are thousands of them." The communication system crackled to life. Director Chen's voice filled the bridge. "Fleet Commander Eastall, I asked you to leave. I gave you every opportunity to make the right choice. You chose not to listen." Eastall tried to respond, but his voice would not come. He cleared his throat and tried again. How is this possible? Where did these ships come from?" "They've always been here, Commander. They're everywhere. You just couldn't see them because we didn't want you to." There was no pride in her voice, no satisfaction, just the same tired patience she had shown before. "Your fleet has been disarmed. We've removed your weapons and disabled your offensive systems. Your engines will be restored in approximately 1 hour. Your life support is functioning normally." "You're letting us go?" "We're letting you deliver a message. Go back to your council. Tell them what happened here. Tell them what you saw. Make sure they understand that we could have destroyed every ship in your fleet, and we chose not to. Make sure they understand that this mercy will not be extended twice." Isatal looked around his bridge. His officers stared at their consoles in shock. Through the viewport, the impossible human fleet waited in perfect silence. "Why?" he asked. "You clearly have the power to destroy us. Why show restraint?" Chen was quiet for a moment before answering. "Because destruction is easy, Commander. Anyone can destroy. We've spent a very long time learning how to do something harder. We've learned how to protect." "Protect who?" "Everyone, even you." She paused. 1 hour, Commander. Use the time to think about what kind of report you want to give. The future relationship between humanity and the Council depends greatly on how this message is delivered." The communication ended. Istol sat in his command chair and stared at the ships surrounding his fleet. He thought about the 200 crews under his command, the thousands of lives that had been in human hands and had been spared. He thought about the weapons his tactical officer could not understand, the power sources that should not exist, the ships that had appeared from nowhere. He thought about Director Chen's tired voice and the sadness in it. 1 hour later, the engines of his fleet came back online exactly as promised. The human ships remained where they were, watching as the Council Armada turned and began the long journey home. Istol spent that journey composing his report. He rewrote it 17 times. Each version tried to capture what he had experienced, and each version felt inadequate. In the end, he settled on simple truth. He described what happened. He described what he saw. He included sensor readings that his own technicians said were impossible. And at the end of the report, he added a personal recommendation. Do not send another fleet. Do not issue another ultimatum. Whatever we think we know about humanity, we are wrong. They are not a species to be integrated. They are a force to be avoided. The Mordesi were right. We should have listened. He submitted the report knowing that no one would follow his advice. He was correct. The war chamber on Varanthos Prime was not the public hall where the council held its formal sessions. It was a smaller room, buried deep beneath the station's surface, where the real decisions were made by those who truly held power. High Arbiter Cosfin stood at the head of a table surrounded by military commanders and faction leaders. Fleet Commander Istol's report glowed on screens throughout the room. The sensor readings, the images of human ships, the impossible numbers. Trickery, Cosfin declared. His voice was firm. But those who knew him well could hear the effort it took to maintain that firmness. The humans used some form of mass hallucination or sensor manipulation. They caught our fleet off guard with clever technology. That is all. Admiral Treshevor of the Karath Empire leaned forward. Her scales were dark green, nearly black, and her eyes held the cold calculation of a career military officer. High Arbiter, with respect, I have reviewed these readings personally. Our sensor technology cannot be fooled this completely. If the humans had that capability, they would already control the galaxy. Then explain what Commander Istol claims to have seen. I cannot explain it, but I also cannot dismiss it. The Mordesi warning deserves consideration. Cosfin slammed one of his four hands on the table. The Mordesi warning is the desperate plea of a species that lost one battle and never recovered its courage. We are not the Mordesi. The Council has resources beyond anything a handful of human colonies could match. Ambassador Threlvak was not present at this meeting. He had not been invited, but his words seemed to hang in the air regardless. We will assemble a proper armada, Cosfin continued, not 200 ships, 3,000. Every warship we can gather from every Council species. We will enter human space with such overwhelming force that their tricks and deceptions will mean nothing. And if their capabilities are real, Admiral Treshevor asked quietly. Cosfin met her gaze. Then we will know the truth. Either way, we cannot allow a potential threat to exist unchecked on our border. The humans have humiliated us. That cannot stand. The discussion continued for hours. Some commanders supported the plan. Others expressed doubt. In the end, the decision was made, as Council decisions always were, by those with the most power imposing their will on those with less. 3,000 ships would be assembled. It would take time. Resources would need to be gathered from across Council space. But within 6 months, the largest fleet in galactic history would enter human territory. While the Council prepared for war, life continued in the territories they already controlled. On the planet Thesek IV, a Mordesi colony world that had been integrated into Council governance 40 years ago, the true meaning of that integration was visible everywhere. The capital city had once been beautiful. Mordesi architecture favored tall spires and flowing curves, buildings that seemed to grow from the ground like natural formations. Now those buildings were surrounded by blocky Council administration centers. Mining equipment scarred the hills outside the city. Factories belched smoke into air that had once been clean. The Mordesi who remained were second-class citizens in their own home. They worked in the mines and factories. They served in Council households. They kept their heads down and tried to survive. A young Mordesi girl named Shella sat on the steps of what had once been her family's home. It now housed a Council administrator who had claimed it through some law she did not understand. She and her mother lived in a small room in the workers' district, sharing a building with 6 other displaced families. Today, the sky was full of ships. She had watched them gathering in orbit for weeks. Everyone knew what they were for. Another Council fleet going off to conquer another species, to bring them the same peace that the Council had brought to Thesek IV. Her mother came and sat beside her. "What are you looking at, little one?" "The ships. They're going to fight the humans." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "Who told you about that?" "Everyone talks about it. They say the humans embarrass the Council. They say the Council will make them pay." More silence. Then her mother put an arm around her shoulders. "What do you think will happen?" Shella considered the question. She was young, but life under Council integration had taught her to think carefully before speaking. "I think the humans will win. Why do you think that? Because the council doesn't understand them. The way the administrators talk about humans, it sounds like the way they talked about us before they came here. They think the humans are weak because they're small, but grandfather said the Mordesi thought the same thing, and they were wrong. Her mother pulled her closer. Your grandfather was a wise person. Do you think the humans will help us? The question hung in the air. It was a dangerous thing to say. Anyone who heard it could report them, but they were alone on the steps, and some things needed to be asked even when they were dangerous. I don't know, Shalala. I hope someone will help us someday, but we cannot count on others. We can only keep surviving until things change. They watched the ships together as more and more rose from the surface to join the growing fleet. Thousands of vessels gathering for a war that would either destroy humanity or reveal the truth of what the Council had provocation. In the Council war chamber, Admiral Treshevore studied the tactical plans one more time. Something felt wrong about all of this. The humans had shown capability far beyond anything the Council possessed. They had demonstrated mercy when destruction would have been easier. These were not the actions of a weak species hoping to delay their inevitable defeat. She kept her doubts to herself. She was a military officer. Her job was to follow orders, not to question them. But in the quiet hours of the night, she found herself reviewing Yisitol's report again and again. The ships that appeared from nowhere, the weapons that should not exist, the voice that offered mercy, and the words that Director Chen had spoken. We've learned how to protect. Protect who? Protect from what? The answer seemed obvious once she allowed herself to see it. The humans were not protecting themselves from the Council. They were protecting others from what they could become if they ever stopped holding back. Treshford did not share this theory with anyone. It was too disturbing, too foreign to everything the Council believed about power and strength. In Council philosophy, power existed to be used. A species that could destroy its enemies and chose not to was weak, foolish, or both. The idea that restraint itself could be a form of strength made no sense. But the numbers in Yistol's report made no sense either, and yet they were real. The fleet assembled over the following months. Ships arrived from every corner of Council space. 3,000 vessels, the combined military might of 47 civilizations, all pointed at a single target. High Arbiter Kosvin insisted on traveling with the fleet. He wanted to witness humanity's submission personally. He wanted to stand on a human world and accept their surrender. Threlvak requested a final meeting before the fleet departed. It was granted, though everyone knew it would change nothing. The old Mordesi ambassador stood before the War Council one last time. His scales had grown even paler in recent months. He looked like a person who had seen the future and found only grief there. I will not repeat my warnings, he said. You have heard them. You have chosen to ignore them. I have only one request. Kosvin waved one of his hands impatiently. Speak. When this is over, when you learn the truth I have tried to share, remember that you had chances to choose differently. Remember that the humans gave you those chances. And remember that whatever happens next, you brought it upon yourselves. He left the chamber without waiting for a response. On Thesek 4, Shella watched the fleet depart. Thousands of ships rising together, blotting out the stars as they passed overhead. The ground shook with the power of their engines. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. Not to the gods her people had worshipped before the Council came. Those gods had not protected them. She prayed to the humans. She prayed that they were everything the Council feared. She prayed that they would do what the Mordesi had never been strong enough to do. She prayed that somewhere in the darkness between stars, there was a force powerful enough to break the Council's grip on the galaxy. In a quiet room on Earth, a man named Marcus Okonkwo sat alone with a cup of tea growing cold in his hands. He had just finished reading the intelligence reports. He knew the fleet was coming. He knew how many ships. He knew that High Arbiter Kosvin himself was aboard. He also knew what would happen next. The plans had been made long ago, during a time when humanity still hoped they would never be needed. Now those plans would be activated. He picked up a communication device and spoke a single phrase. Protocol Shepard is authorized. Then he finished his cold tea and stared out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, 3,000 ships were coming to make war on his people. He felt sorry for them. The Council Armada emerged from faster-than-light travel in the heart of human space. 3,000 ships hung in the void, their weapons charged, their crews ready for battle. The largest military force ever assembled by the Galactic Council had arrived to demand humanity's surrender. They found nothing. High Admiral Vescor, commander of the combined fleet, stared at the sensor readings with growing confusion. The system they had entered should have been heavily populated. According to Council intelligence, it was home to one of humanity's oldest and most important colonies. Instead, the screen showed empty space. "Where are their defense platforms?" he demanded. "Where are their patrol ships?" "Nothing on sensors." "Hi, Admiral." "No military vessels of any kind. Only civilian stations and surface installations." Vescor turned to where High Arbiter Cosfin stood watching. The politician had insisted on being present on the bridge for humanity's defeat. Now his forearms were crossed, and his expression was somewhere between impatience and uncertainty. "This is some kind of trap," Kosovin said. "They are hiding their forces. Advance toward the planet. Force them to reveal themselves." "High Arbiter, caution would suggest—" "I did not ask for suggestions. I gave an order. Move the fleet forward." Vescor hesitated for just a moment. He had read Yastol's report. He had seen the impossible sensor readings. Everything in his training screamed that this situation was wrong. But orders were orders. All ships advanced toward the primary planet. Standard approach formation. Weapons ready. 3,000 ships began to move. On the planet below, a human city called New Geneva spread across a river valley surrounded by mountains. It was a beautiful place, with parks and gardens visible between buildings that seemed to flow naturally into the landscape. Children played in open spaces. Families walked along tree-lined streets. None of them seemed concerned about the armada in orbit. In a comfortable house near the city center, a man named David Way helped his daughter pack a small bag. She was 7 years old, with dark hair like his wife and curious eyes that always seemed to be asking questions. "Where are we going, Daddy?" "Somewhere safe for a little while. Like a vacation." "Because of the ships?" David knelt down to look his daughter in the eyes. "Yes, because of the ships. Some visitors are coming, and the grown-ups need to have a conversation with them. It's easier if we're not in the way." His daughter considered this. "Are the visitors mean?" "They think they are, but they're going to learn something important very soon." "What are they going to learn?" David smiled, but there was something sad in it. "They're going to learn that being strong doesn't mean you have to hurt people, and that some things are worth protecting even when protecting them is hard." His wife appeared in the doorway. "The transport is ready." They walked together through streets full of other families heading to the same place. Underground shelters had been prepared years ago for exactly this situation. They were comfortable, with everything needed for an extended stay. The children would have space to play. The adults would have work to do while they waited. Nobody was panicking. Nobody was crying. They moved with the calm purpose of people who had prepared for this moment and trusted the plan. High above them, the Council fleet approached orbit. On the bridge of the flagship, Vescor watched the planet grow larger in the viewport. Still no response from the human military. Still no defensive moves of any kind. The civilian stations they passed broadcast nothing but automated messages asking them to turn back. "We are in optimal bombardment range," his tactical officer reported. Cosfin stepped forward. His earlier uncertainty had faded, replaced by the familiar arrogance of someone who believed he was about to win. "Target their government facilities. Show them that resistance has consequences." "High Arbiter, they have not resisted. They have not even responded to our communications. Then they need motivation to reconsider their silence. Fire." Vescor looked at his tactical officer, then at Cosfin, then at the peaceful planet turning slowly below them. He gave the order. 1,000 weapons fired simultaneously. Plasma bursts and kinetic projectiles and directed energy beams, all converging on targets across the planet's surface. And then they stopped. Not exploded, not deflected, simply stopped, frozen in space as if time itself had paused around them. Vescor stared at the viewport. He could see the weapons fire hanging motionless, kilometers from the planet's surface. Thousands of projectiles and energy beams suspended like insects in amber. "What is happening?" Cosfin's voice had lost its certainty. "What is this?" Before anyone could answer, the humans arrived. They came from everywhere at once, from above, from below, from angles that made no geometric sense. One moment the Council fleet was alone. The next moment they were surrounded by ships that defied description. The human vessels were massive. The smallest of them stretched kilometers in length. The largest were the size of small moons, their surfaces covered in structures that seemed to shift and change as Vesicor watched. They did not register on sensors until they wanted to. They had simply been invisible until they chose not to be. There were thousands of them, tens of thousands. They formed a perfect sphere around the Council Armada, layer upon layer of ships that made 3,000 Council vessels look like insects surrounded by gods. A voice filled every communication channel on every Council ship simultaneously. "This is Admiral Sarah Okonkwo of the Human Protectorate Fleet. You have entered our space without permission. You have threatened our people. You have fired weapons at our world." The voice was calm. There was no anger in it, no fear, no excitement, just a clear statement of facts. "We gave your commander at New Meridian a chance to leave peacefully. He chose not to take it. We sent your fleet home with a warning. Your council chose to ignore it." Cosvin was shouting at his communication officers, demanding that someone respond, that someone explain what was happening. No one could give him answers. "We have watched your council for 300 years. We have seen what you do to species you call weaker. We have seen the worlds you strip bare and the peoples you reduce to servants. We chose not to interfere because we hoped you would change. We hoped you would grow beyond conquest and control." The frozen weapons fire began to dissolve, breaking apart into harmless particles that drifted away into the void. "You have not changed. You have come to our home. You have pointed weapons at our children, and now you will learn why that was a mistake." The communication ended. For a moment, nothing happened. The Council fleet hung motionless, surrounded by the impossible human armada. Every crew member on every ship held their breath. Then a single human vessel moved forward from the sphere. It was smaller than the others, though still twice the size of the largest Council dreadnought. It approached the flagship slowly, almost gently. Vescor watched it come. He knew he should give orders. He should organize resistance, coordinate his fleet, do something. But his body would not obey him. He could only stand and watch. The human ship stopped a few kilometers away. A shuttle detached from its hull and floated toward the flagship's docking bay. "They're boarding us," someone said. "Should we resist?" someone else asked. Vescor finally found his voice. "No, whatever is about to happen, resistance will not help us. Open the docking bay. Let them come." The shuttle landed without incident. Moments later, the flagship's internal sensors showed a small group of humans walking through the corridors toward the bridge. They encountered no opposition. No crew members tried to stop them. The bridge doors opened. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo walked onto the Council flagship like she owned it. She was a tall woman with dark skin and gray-streaked hair, wearing a uniform that was simpler than any Council military dress. Behind her came 4 soldiers in armor that moved with a fluid grace, their weapons visible but not raised. She stopped in front of Cosvin. "High Arbiter, we finally meet." Cosvin tried to speak. His voice came out as a croak. He cleared his throat and tried again. "This is an act of war." "No, High Arbiter. This is an act of education." She turned to look at the viewport, at the human ships filling the sky. "For 300 years, we have watched your council spread across the galaxy. We have seen you conquer species who could not defend themselves. We have seen you strip their worlds, destroy their cultures, reduce proud peoples to labor forces for your benefit. And we have done nothing." She turned back to face him. "That was wrong. We told ourselves we were waiting for the right moment, gathering strength, preparing for a confrontation that might never come. In truth, we were afraid. Not of losing. We knew we could not lose. We were afraid of what winning might mean. We were afraid of becoming like you." Cosvin found some of his old arrogance. "Then destroy us. Prove that you are the monsters you claim not to be." Admiral Okonkwo smiled. It was not a happy expression. "That would be the easy path, wouldn't it? Kill you all and call it justice. Your fleet attacked our world. By any reasonable standard, we would be justified in destroying every ship here." She stepped closer to him. "But that is not what we do. We do not destroy, we protect. And today we are going to protect the galaxy from you. How? By showing everyone what the Council truly is, by ending your ability to conquer and control, and by giving every species you have ever subjugated the chance to decide their own future. Outside the viewport, the human ships began to move, not to attack, to spread out, forming a pattern that stretched across the entire system. Admiral Okonkwo's voice carried across every communication frequency, reaching every ship in the Council fleet and broadcasting to every world in Council space. Peoples of the galaxy, this is humanity. We have stayed silent too long. That silence ends today. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted exactly 6 minutes. It began when Admiral Vescor, in a final desperate act of defiance, ordered his fleet to fire. Every weapon in the Council Armada activated at once. 3,000 ships unleashed everything they had against the human vessels surrounding them. None of it mattered. The human ships did not dodge. They did not deploy shields. They simply absorbed the attacks like mountains absorbing rain. Plasma bursts splashed against hulls that did not even glow from the heat. Kinetic projectiles bounced away like pebbles thrown at stone walls. Energy beams scattered and faded against surfaces that seemed to drink them in. Then the humans responded. They did not fire weapons. They did not need to. Instead, they moved through the Council fleet with surgical precision, and as they passed, ships simply stopped working. Weapons went offline, engines failed, communication systems died. Vescor watched his tactical display as his fleet was systematically disarmed. One by one, the lights representing active warships flickered and changed color, showing disabled rather than destroyed. The humans were taking apart the greatest military force the Council had ever assembled, and they were doing it without killing a single person. 6 minutes after it began, it was over. 3,000 Council ships drifted in space, powerless but intact. Their crews were alive, their life support functioning, their medical bays still operational. They had been defeated more thoroughly than any fleet in galactic history, and yet none of them were dead. High Arbiter Kosovan sat on the deck of his flagship's bridge. He had fallen at some point during the battle and had not bothered to get up. Around him, his officers stood in a stunned silence. Admiral Okonkwo remained where she had been throughout, watching the viewport with an expression that might have been sadness. "Why?" Kosovan finally asked. His voice was barely a whisper. "Why not just kill us? We attacked your world. We threatened your people. By any law of warfare, you have the right to destroy us." Admiral Okonkwo turned to look at him. "Rights are not the same as obligations, High Arbiter. We had the right to destroy you. We also had the choice not to. We chose mercy." "Mercy?" He spat the word like it was poison. "This is not mercy. This is humiliation." "Perhaps, but humiliation can be survived. Destruction cannot." She walked over to where he sat and crouched down to meet his eyes. "You do not understand us, Kosovan. You never have. You see our restraint and call it weakness. You see our mercy and call it humiliation. You cannot imagine a species that has the power to destroy everything and chooses not to. Because such a species does not exist. Power must be used, or it means nothing." "That is where you are wrong." She stood up. "Power means nothing if it is used without purpose. We have spent 300 years building strength, not to conquer, not to control, but to protect, to make sure that when this day came, we would be able to end the Council's reign of terror without becoming monsters ourselves." She turned to address the bridge crew. "Your ships will be returned to you. Your weapons will not. You will be escorted to the edge of human space and released. When you return to your council, you will deliver a message." She paused to make sure everyone was listening. "The Galactic Council is finished, not destroyed. Finished. Humanity will not conquer your worlds or subjugate your peoples. But we will no longer allow you to do those things to others. Every species you have integrated will be given the choice to leave. Every world you have stripped will receive assistance to recover. Every wrong you have committed will be addressed." "You cannot enforce such demands," Kosovan said. "Even with all your power, you cannot be everywhere at once. We do not need to be everywhere. We only need to be wherever injustice occurs. and we have been watching long enough to know exactly where to look. The message Admiral Okonkwo broadcast that day reached every corner of Council space. It reached the integrated colonies where enslaved populations worked in mines and factories. It reached the Council core worlds, where the ruling species had grown fat on the labor of others. It reached every ship, every station, every world that had ever been touched by Council governance. And it changed everything. On Thessic IV, the Mordesi heard the broadcast in their cramped worker housing, and their mining camps, and their factory floors. They heard a human voice telling them that help was coming, that the Council could no longer hurt them, that they would be free to choose their own future. Shelala stood with her mother in the workers' district, watching the Council administrators flee toward the spaceport. Their ships were leaving orbit. Their soldiers were abandoning their posts. For the first time in 40 years, the Mordesi were alone on their own world. "What happens now?" Shella asked. Her mother was crying. She had not cried since Shella's father died in a mining accident 5 years ago. But now tears ran down her faded scales, and she did not try to hide them. "Now we rebuild, little one. Now we remember who we were before they came." 1 year later, Ambassador Threlvok stood in a garden on New Geneva. The sun was warm on his old scales. Birds sang in trees that had come from a dozen different worlds. It was, he thought, the most peaceful place he had ever been. Director Chen stood beside him. She had been his primary contact with humanity since the end of the Council, working with him to coordinate relief efforts and reconstruction programs across former Council space. "How is Tasaka 4? She asked. "Recovering. The mines are being closed. The factories are being converted to produce things my people actually need. We have begun teaching our children the old songs again." He paused. "It will take generations to heal completely, but we have generations now. Thanks to you. Thanks to humanity, I am just one person. One person who represents something remarkable." Threlvok turned to face her. "I have wondered something for a long time. May I ask you a question?" "Of course." "When the Mordesi attacked your fleet 50 years ago, why did you stop? Why did you offer us medical assistance instead of finishing what we started?" Director Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she answered, her voice was soft. "Because you were hurting. Because you had been taught that violence was the only way to be strong. Because we looked at your ships and saw not enemies, but people who had been failed by everyone who should have protected them." She smiled sadly. "We could not undo the damage the Council had done to your culture, but we could choose not to add to it. And if we had continued firing, if we had rejected your mercy, then we would have defended ourselves. We are not suicidal, but even then, we would have taken no pleasure in it, and we would have tried to minimize the harm." Threlvok nodded slowly. This was the thing he had never understood before meeting humans. The thing his people and the Council and every other species in the galaxy had failed to grasp. True strength was not the ability to destroy. True strength was the ability to destroy and the choice not to. True strength was building when you could burn, healing when you could harm, offering mercy when vengeance would be so much easier. "There is something I should tell you," he said. "After the war with your people, after those 11 terrible minutes, I filed a report with my government. I recommended that we never speak of what happened, that we hide our defeat and never give the Council reason to investigate humanity. I know we intercepted that report." "You did?" He was surprised, then laughed. "Of course you did. You have been watching everything. We have been watching, and we have been hoping. For 50 years, we hoped that someone in the Council would listen to the warning you tried to give, that someone would choose a different path. They did not listen. No, but you tried. That mattered to us." She put a hand on his shoulder. "That is why you were the first ambassador we contacted when we began reaching out to former Council species. We remembered that you tried to stop this. We remembered that your voice spoke for peace, even when no one would hear it." They stood together in the garden, watching ships of a dozen species fly overhead. Not warships. Transport vessels and construction drones and medical frigates, all working together to rebuild what the Council had broken. "What happens now?" Threlvok asked. "You have ended the Council. You have freed the integrated species, but you cannot watch over us forever. We do not intend to. Our goal was never to rule the galaxy. It was to give the galaxy a chance to rule itself fairly. Director Chen pointed to the ships above them. In 20 years, perhaps 30, there will be a new council. Not like the old one where every species has an equal voice, one where integration happens through choice rather than conquest, one where the strong protect the weak instead of preying on them. And humanity will be part of this council? If we are invited. If we are not, we will step back into the shadows again. We will watch, we will wait, and we will be ready to act if injustice returns. You would accept not being part of the government you helped create? Director Chen smiled. We did not do this for power, Ambassador. We did it because it was right. If the galaxy no longer needs our protection, that will be the greatest success we could hope for. Threlvak looked at her for a long moment. Then he bowed, a gesture of deep respect among his people. My granddaughter prayed to you, you know. On the day the Council fleet departed for human space, she prayed that you would do what the Mordesi never could. I did not know that. Her prayers were answered. He straightened. I will make sure my people never forget what you did for us. The Mordesi will stand with humanity for as long as our species exists. That is all we ever wanted. Not subjects, not worshippers, just friends. They walked together through the garden, two old souls who had seen too much and finally found reason to hope. Above them, the ships continued their work. Around them, a galaxy began the long process of healing. And somewhere in the depths of space, the human fleet waited, not to conquer, not to control, but to protect. Always to protect. This was humanity's gift to the stars. Not power, but purpose. Not dominion, but guardianship. The knowledge that strength without compassion was meaningless, and that true victory meant everyone got to go home. The Council had asked why humans showed mercy when they could destroy. Now the galaxy knew the answer, because that was what humans were for.